Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and generally at this time of year, one of the most requested cakes are red velvet cakes. Something about that beautiful red fluffy texture and that yummy chocolate and that yummy cream cheese frosting on top, everybody seems to love at this time of year, or any time of year for that matter. My son, this is his favorite cake, and he'll take it any time of year. So of course, today's recipe is for gluten-free, keto-friendly red velvet cake, and we're not going to forget that yummy cream cheese frosting that is also gluten-free and keto-friendly. And if you want printable versions of these recipes, you can check out my website at janetsdeliciouslowcarbkitchen.com. You can find a printable version of these recipes and other goodies there for you. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Also, don't forget to hit that little notification bell, then you can be notified every time I put out a new video. And while you do that, let's get cooking. Preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Line and spray 2 9-inch round cake pans. It's important to line them and spray them because this batter is going to be a little bit on the sticky side. So you want to make sure that it doesn't stick to your pans, so line them and spray them. In a medium mixing bowl, add 1 3/4 cup of almond flour, 1/4 cup coconut flour, a half cup of whey protein powder or any low carb flour of your choice. You can use more almond flour if you want to. But I will give you a heads up that if you do choose to substitute out the whey protein powder for almond flour or another low carb flour, it can affect the texture of your cake. It won't necessarily make it bad, but it can make it a little more dense. So it's up to you whether you want to trade out that whey protein powder or not. Just give you a heads up that it will affect the texture a little bit. Also, if you do choose to use another low carb flour other than the whey protein powder, do not use more coconut flour. This will make your cake really, really dense, really dry, and it'll come out just nasty. Because coconut flour is very absorbent, and in order for you to replace it with more coconut flour, you'd have to readjust the eggs, readjust the liquid, and it would just be a big mess. So you do not want to trade it out for more coconut flour. More almond flour or another low-carb flour would be fine, but not coconut flour. Add 1 teaspoon xanthan gum. This is your binding agent, along with the whey protein. The whey protein powder also helps bind. That's why you get a better texture when you put the whey protein powder in, because it does help with the binding agent also. But the xanthan gum is your main binding agent, so you definitely want to keep that. 1/2 cup of natural cocoa powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon salt. Whisk these all together just until they're evenly combined and there's no lumps in the cocoa or the flours. Cocoa powder likes to bunch up, and so does coconut flour likes to bunch up, so really make sure that you get those lumps out without over stirring. When you're done whisking that together, set it aside. In a large mixer bowl, add 3/4 cup of softened butter. Make sure it's just soft, not melted. It should be soft enough where it can slide through your fingers without having to really push on it, but it shouldn't be coming out liquidy either. So it just should be soft, just enough to be able to mold it. Add 1 1/4 cup monk fruit sweetener or granulated sweetener of your choice. Beat these together on low for 10 seconds just to combine them, and then bump it up to medium and beat it on for 3 to 4 minutes or until it's nice and creamy and fluffy. Scrape down the sides and add 5 eggs, one at a time. After you add each egg, you're going to beat it on low for about 10 to 15 seconds, just enough to combine the egg before you add the next egg. So don't overstir it, you just want it enough to combine the egg. Add a half cup of sour cream. Make sure it's room temperature, that way it mixes in better. A half cup of milk of your choice. Again, make sure it is room temperature. All of your ingredients need to be room temperature in order for them to bind together the best and give you the smoothest batter. Add 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract and 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. Beat these on low about 10 to 15 seconds or just until they're combined. Don't overstir them. Take your bowl of dry ingredients and slowly add about half the amount of the dry ingredients to the wet ingredients. Beat it on low for about 10 seconds or just until the dry ingredients is wet. Doesn't have to be fully combined yet, but you do want that dry ingredients wet, that way it doesn't fly all over the place. Add the remaining dry ingredients and beat it on low for about 15 to 20 seconds or just until it's fully combined and there's no dry ingredients left in the bowl. Again, you don't want to overstir it, just beat it enough till everything's fully combined. Scrape down the sides and let the batter sit for about 3 minutes. This is necessary, don't skip this step. This allows the xanthan gum to start beginning to do its job of binding the ingredients together, and it also helps the coconut flour to absorb a little bit of the moisture. Coconut flour is very, very absorbent, and so 9 times out of 10, most batters, when they contain any amount of coconut flour, they need to sit a little bit so the coconut flour can absorb the moisture and then it expands in volume a little bit. And this is what you want to happen in this batter. This batter will be a little bit thick, but that's a good thing. That's what we want. Once the batter has set for 3 minutes, scrape down the sides again and just make sure that it is all sticking together good. Add 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. It's important to add these after your batter has set, because as soon as you add the baking soda and baking powder, you're going to be putting it in the oven to cook. Because if you were to put it in and then let the batter sit for 3 minutes, then the leavening power of the baking soda especially will taper off and your cakes won't rise as well. So you let that batter sit for 3 minutes, then you add the baking soda and the baking powder so you get the most out of your leavening agents. Then you're going to add the desired amount of red food coloring. This is what makes your red velvet cake. Then beat on low for 10 to 15 seconds or just until it's fully combined. Just until the food colorings all throughout the batter and the baking soda and baking powder are nice and combined. Again, do not overstir it. Now I only put 1.5 teaspoons of red gel food coloring. It didn't really make it all that red, so it all depends on how red you want your cake. It gave it a little slight red tint, but not very much so. I'd probably add a little bit more if you want it to really have that red velvet look to it. But it's up to you on how red you want your cake to be. Also, if you are using liquid food coloring other than gel food coloring, I use gel food coloring, and again, I use only about 1/2 teaspoon to 2 teaspoons of it. But if you are using liquid food coloring other than gel food coloring, you'll need to use a lot more liquid food coloring, probably close to a tablespoon or more. And also, if you use the liquid instead of the gel, it has a tendency to water the batter down because you do have to use quite a bit more of it. So if I were you, I would stick with the gel food coloring, but if all you have is the liquid food coloring, it'll be fine, but you may need to adjust the almond flour just a little bit more to help balance out that extra moisture that the liquid food coloring gives. So you may need to play around a little bit with that on how much you want and how red you want your cake to be. Once it's all combined, divide the batter evenly between the 2 prepared cake pans. It's basically a little over 2 cups of batter in each cake pan if you want to measure it out exact. But it doesn't have to be exact. You just want it pretty much evenly between both cake pans. Pop them in your oven, bake for 35 to 40 minutes or until a tester comes out clean. Remember not to judge whether it's done or not by how the top looks. Again, gluten-free. This is gluten-free, so the tops do brown a little bit faster. But just because the tops are getting brown doesn't necessarily mean it's done all the way through. So make sure that you use a toothpick or a skewer or a tester of some sort to put through the middle of the cake, and if it comes out clean, it's done. If it still has wet on it, it's not done. So in my oven, 35 minutes is perfect, but everybody's oven varies. So 35 to 40 minutes should be perfect. Once it's baked, let the cakes cool in the pans for about 15 minutes. Once they've cooled, use a butter knife and gently loosen the edges from the sides of the pans. Once the sides are loosened, let the cakes cool in the pans for another hour at least so all the ingredients can sit well. Remember, I will tell you this all the time, gluten-free batters are very, very fragile when they are hot. So you have to let them cool in the pan before you decide to take them out. You do not want to take them directly out of the oven and flop them onto a wire rack. They will fall apart. So make sure you let it cool for at least an hour in those pans so everything can set really well together. Once it's set for an hour, then use your butter knife again and gently loosen the edges if you need to. Then carefully turn the cakes out onto wire racks so they can cool completely. Again, be careful because they still will be slightly warm, so they will still be a little bit fragile. So just be careful, don't just plop them out on your wire racks. Be gentle with them and let them cool completely before you frost them. I usually wait another 30 minutes at least just to make sure that it's completely cooled off, because if you try to frost them when there's any warmth in those cakes, then they're going to fall apart. The top of it's going to peel and you're going to have a crumbly cake. So really make sure they're cooled off all the way. If you want, you can even put them in the refrigerator for, 10-15 minutes and make sure they get a good chill on them. It's up to you how you want to do it. I just put them on my countertop for, like I said, another 30 minutes or so. Just make sure they're really nice and cool. For the frosting, in a large mixer bowl, combine 8 ounces of cream cheese. Make sure it's softened, not melted, just soft enough that you can mold it without having to put a bunch of pressure on it. And a half cup of softened butter, again, just softened, not melted. It should just be soft enough that you can slide it through your fingers without it becoming liquid. And 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Beat these on low for 10 seconds, then on medium for 2 to 3 minutes or until it's nice and creamy and fluffy. Add 1 cup of powdered swerve or powdered sweetener of your choice and beat on low 15 to 20 seconds or just until the swerve is fully combined with the butter and cream cheese. Add 1 more cup of powdered swerve or powdered sweetener of your choice and beat on medium for 1 minute or until it's fully combined and smooth and creamy. It should look like thick, creamy frosting. To assemble the cake, place 1 cake onto your serving platter. Then scoop about 3/4 cup of the frosting onto the top of the cake and spread the frosting evenly over the top of the cake. Make sure it is nice and even because you're going to be setting the other cake on top and you want it to set evenly, because if it's lopsided, it's going to topple over. So really make sure that the frosting is nice and even across the top of that cake. Once it's spread nice and even, then place the second cake on top and spread about 1.5 cups of the frosting evenly over the top of that second cake. Then with the remaining frosting, you're going to spread it around the sides of both of the cakes, so everything is frosted, the tops and the sides, and it looks like one big cake. You can't even see the layers. Now, if you're not using a piping bag to frost this, but you still want some kind of a textured or design look on, all you need to do is take a butter knife and do a thin, even layer around the top and the sides, nice and smooth. And then with the remaining frosting, take your butter knife and use short swirling motions as you're frosting it on the sides of the cake. And that'll give it kind of a wavy look on the sides of your cake to give it a little bit more of a textured look, so it's not just a plain ordinary cake. And then for the top, if you want more of a textured look, then spread an even layer across the top and then pile up small amounts of frosting around the edges of the top of the cake. And again, use your butter knife and do short swirling motions to give it a little bit of a wavy look around the edges. And keep the center of the top of the cake nice and smooth. Then I like to decorate it with a little bit of grated chocolate on top. I'm using my homemade keto chocolate. I gave you guys the recipe to this in my keto chocolate chip video, but I'll also put a link in the description to the written recipe of the chocolate if you want to make your own chocolate. Otherwise, you can buy sugar-free and keto-friendly chocolate in the stores. Just grate up a little bit on top just to give it a little bit of color to it. Once it's all decorated, store it in an airtight container and keep it in your fridge until you're ready to use it. Once you're ready to eat it, take it out, slice your desired piece, place it on a platter, and eat and enjoy. And that's our recipe of the day. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like and the subscribe button. Leave me a comment if you want to. Let me know if there's any recipes that you'd like to learn how to make, and I'll do what I can to get those out there for you. And as always, keep cooking.